The rain hammered against my windshield like nature's own interrogation, each drop demanding answers I didn't have yet. I'd been driving for 3 hours straight from that pointless electrical contractors conference in Albany, my mind still buzzing with talk of new voltage regulations and copper wire prices. James Parish, that's me, 44 years old, owner of Parish Electric, and apparently the last guy in town to figure out his wife was entertaining guests while he was away. My phone buzzed against the dashboard. A text from Beth. "Don't worry about dinner. I'm not bored tonight, especially since I'm not alone. LOL. LOL." She actually wrote LOL. I pulled into our driveway, well, what used to feel like our driveway, and sat there for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. The house looked different somehow. Maybe it was the way the porch light cast shadows, or maybe it was the unfamiliar pickup truck parked where I usually put my work van. A shiny red Chevy that I recognized all too well. My brother Nick's truck. I'm not exactly a genius, but I know enough about electricity to recognize when something isn't right. And at that moment, every alarm in my head was blaring like a smoke detector with a fading battery. Annoying, relentless, and impossible to ignore. Instead of walking up to my front door like some kind of fool, I did what any reasonable man would do in 2023. I pulled out my phone and opened the home security app. Beth had insisted we install those cameras last year after Mrs. Callahan next door got her garden gnomes stolen. For safety, she'd said. Right now, I was grateful for her paranoia. The living room camera loaded slowly, buffering like my patience. Then the image cleared. There they were, my wife and my younger brother, on my couch, sharing what looked like takeout from Giovanni's, the expensive Italian place Beth always said we couldn't afford. She was wearing that red dress she claimed was too fancy for Parish Hollow. Nick was in his usual tight t-shirt, the one that showed off his gym muscles and his complete lack of common sense. They weren't just eating. I watched my wife laugh at something Nick said, watched her lean into him, watched her do things that made my stomach clench like a fist. The timestamp showed they'd been there for over 2 hours. Well, ain't that something, I muttered to my empty truck cab. My own brother. How wonderfully original. I sat there in the rain, watching my marriage dissolve in real time through a smartphone screen. Part of me wanted to storm inside, flip tables, demand explanations. But the smarter part, the part that had built a successful electrical business from nothing, told me to wait, to think, to plan. See, here's what people don't understand about electrical work. It's not just about connecting wires. It's about understanding the whole system, finding the weak points, knowing exactly where to apply pressure to make everything shut down properly. I backed out of the driveway and drove to Jack's Bar, the only place in Parish Hollow that stayed open past 9 on weeknights. The neon sign flickered, needed new ballasts, but Jack was too cheap to hire me to fix it properly. Inside, the usual crowd of mill workers and retirees nursed their beers and complained about the weather. I ordered a whiskey, pulled out a notebook, and started making lists. Not a hit list. I'm not that kind of guy. But a comprehensive inventory of assets, relationships, and leverage points. Beth Parish, age 40. Married to me for 18 years. Recently started some kind of social media consulting business. Though I'd never seen much evidence of actual income, loved appearances, hated confrontation, and apparently had a thing for younger men with gym memberships. Nick Parish, age 38. My baby brother. Never held a job longer than 2 years, always borrowing money, always in my shadow. Recently moved back to Parish Hollow after his latest business venture, some kind of protein shake pyramid scheme, collapsed in Buffalo. The whiskey burned, but not as much as the realization that I'd been supporting both of them. Beth with our joint accounts, Nick with the occasional loan that never got repaid. I'd been funding my own betrayal. My phone buzzed. Another text from Beth. Working late at Monica's. Don't wait up. Monica Hendricks, Beth's best friend and partner in whatever scheme they called a business. I'd never liked Monica. Something about her smile never reached her eyes. She had this way of looking at me like I was a problem that needed solving. I finished my whiskey and drove to Monica's house. No red pickup truck in sight, no lights on upstairs. Either they were being very quiet about their work, or Beth was getting comfortable with lying. The rain had stopped by the time I got home. Nick's truck was gone, but I could smell his cologne in the entryway. Some expensive stuff that probably cost more than my work boots. The couch cushions were rearranged, and there were 2 wine glasses in the sink. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Beth came home at midnight, humming some tune I didn't recognize. She found me in the kitchen, reading electrical supply catalogs. How was the conference? She asked, not quite meeting my eyes. Educational, I said. Learned a lot about power distribution, how to identify overloaded circuits, when systems are about to fail. She laughed, but it sounded forced. You and your electrical metaphors. I'm exhausted. Long day of client meetings. I'm sure it was. I closed the catalog and looked at her. Really looked. Her makeup was fresh. Her hair was perfect. Her dress wasn't wrinkled. Either Monica had a full salon setup, or Beth had been doing something that didn't involve much actual work. She went upstairs, and I heard the shower running. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the life I'd built, and realized that everything I thought I knew was about to change. But here's the thing about being an electrician. You learn to work with dangerous currents. You learn to respect power, to channel it properly, to make sure it goes exactly where it needs to go. And sometimes, when a system is corrupted beyond repair, you have to shut it down completely before you can rebuild it right. I pulled out my notebook and started writing. The next morning, Beth was gone before I got up. No note, no goodbye, just the lingering scent of her perfume and an empty coffee pot. I found a text on my phone. Busy day ahead. Monica and I have a big presentation, dinner with clients tonight. Right. Clients. I called my foreman, Tommy Briggs, and told him I'd be late to the job site. Then I drove across town to Nick's rental house, a cramped 2-bedroom that our mother had co-signed for because my brother's credit was worse than a short circuit. Nick's place sat on Elm Street, wedged between a vacant lot and Mrs. Patterson's flower garden. His red pickup was in the driveway, still warm. I knocked on the front door, practicing my best concerned brother expression. Jimmy? Nick opened the door with a grin that would have been convincing if I hadn't watched him kissing my wife 12 hours earlier. What brings you by? Just checking on you, I said, stepping inside without invitation. The place reeked of cheap air freshener and guilt. Haven't seen much of you lately. Been busy, you know. Got some new business opportunities brewing. He gestured toward his kitchen table, which was covered with protein powder samples and what looked like a multi-level marketing manual. Want some coffee? Sure. I sat down and watched him fumble with the coffee maker. Nick had always been nervous around me, ever since we were kids. I was the responsible one, the one who finished things, the one who made our parents proud. He was the charmer, the one who talked his way out of trouble and into other people's beds. So, what kind of business opportunities? I asked. Wellness industry. Huge potential. There's this company, Nutramax Solutions, and they're looking for regional distributors. He handed me a mug with a chip in the handle. I'm thinking about investing. With what money? His smile flickered. Well, I was hoping maybe you could help me out. Just a small loan. I'd pay you back with interest. Of course he would. I sipped the coffee, it was terrible, and studied my brother's face. He had our father's jawline, but none of his integrity. Mom always said Nick just needed the right opportunity, the right guidance. She never said what I was thinking, that some people are just wired wrong from the start. How much? I asked. 5,000, maybe 10. It's a sure thing, Jimmy. Nothing was ever a sure thing with Nick, except disappointment. I'd learned that lesson repeatedly over the years, but apparently I was a slow learner when it came to family. I'll think about it, I said. Been having some cash flow issues myself. Beth's been spending a lot lately. Women, right? Nick laughed, but there was something off about it. They all want the finer things. Speaking of Beth, she mentioned seeing you around town. Said you looked good. Been working out? The question hit him like a live wire. His face went red, and he started babbling about his new gym membership, his personal trainer, his commitment to fitness. All the while, his eyes were darting around the room like he was looking for an escape route. That's great, I said. Maybe we should all get together sometime, you, me, Beth, like old times. Sure. That sounds great, real great. I finished my coffee and stood up. Well, I better get to work. These electrical systems don't fix themselves. Right. Yeah, thanks for stopping by. I paused at the door. Oh, and Nick, if you ever need anything, you know you can call me. Family's important. Absolutely. Family first. I drove to the job site thinking about family, about loyalty, about the difference between the two. We were rewiring an old factory on the south side of town, the kind of building that had been constructed when people built things to last. Solid foundations, quality materials, honest craftsmanship. Not like the cheap, flashy stuff they put up nowadays. Tommy was already there with the crew, running conduit through the basement. Boss, he called out when he saw me. Got a question about the main panel. The specs don't match what's actually here. I I spent the next hour sorting out the electrical plans, finding the discrepancies, figuring out what was real and what was just pretty drawings on paper. It was satisfying work, the kind where problems had solutions, where you could trust your instruments, where things either worked or they didn't. Around lunchtime, my phone rang. Beth. "Hi, honey," she said, and I could hear traffic in the background. "I'm going to be late tonight. This client presentation is running long." "Which client?" I asked. "Oh, you wouldn't know them. Small local business. Monica found them." "What kind of business?" Retail. They need help with their social media presence." I made a note in my phone. Beth claims to be with retail client, 12:47 p.m., traffic sounds in background. "That's great," I said. "Business is picking up." It really is. Monica thinks we might need to expand soon. "Speaking of Monica, didn't you work late at her place last night?" A pause. Just a half second, but I caught it. "Yes, we're really focused on growing the company." "I'm proud of you," I said, and meant it. I was proud of her commitment to deception. It took real dedication to maintain this many lies simultaneously. After work, I drove past Monica's office, a converted storefront on Main Street with Hendrix Media Solutions painted on the window. The lights were off, no cars in the parking spaces out front. I tried the Italian restaurant where Nick claimed to have a dinner meeting. The hostess, a chatty college girl named Amy, remembered him well. "Oh yeah, the cute guy with the muscles? He was here yesterday around 7. Had dinner with a really pretty blonde woman. They seemed close, if you know what I mean." I knew exactly what she meant. That evening, I sat in my living room and opened my laptop. Time for some research. Beth had left her social media accounts logged in on our shared computer, another sign of how comfortable she'd gotten with her double life. Her recent activity told an interesting story, lots of private messages with Monica, most of them coded, but clearly about me. "Jay is getting suspicious," one said. "Maybe we should slow down," said another. But the most interesting messages weren't with Monica. They were with someone named Nick P38, my brother's initials and birth year. Real subtle. The conversation went back 3 months. It started innocent enough. Nick asking about my work schedule, Beth complaining about feeling unappreciated, but it escalated quickly into something that made my jaw clench. "He doesn't understand you like I do," Nick had written. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd met you first," Beth had replied. "It's not too late," Nick had said. I closed the laptop and went to the kitchen, made myself a sandwich, opened a beer, and sat at the table where Beth and I used to plan our future. We talked about retirement, about traveling, about growing old together in this house I'd bought with my first big electrical contract. Funny how plans change. My phone buzzed with another text from Beth. "Don't wait up, celebrating a successful presentation." I texted back, "Congratulations, proud of you." Then I opened my notebook and started making a different kind of plan. The Parish Hollow Community Center was buzzing with the usual Friday night energy, teenagers playing basketball, elderly folks doing their water aerobics, and the monthly town council meeting wrapping up in the main hall. I'd come here to clear my head, maybe shoot some hoops with the guys from my crew, but instead I found myself watching my 15-year-old daughter Becca hold court near the vending machines. She was surrounded by her usual crowd of friends, all of them glued to their phones, occasionally looking up to giggle at something on their screens. When she saw me approaching, her expression shifted from animated to annoyed in about half a second. "Dad?" she said, like my name was a curse word. "What are you doing here?" "Nice to see you too, sweetheart. Thought I might catch your volleyball practice." "That was yesterday. God, you never pay attention." Her friends exchanged glances, and I caught one of them whispering something about Beth's drama. My wife had apparently been sharing our family business with anyone who'd listen. "Can we talk?" I asked Becca. "Privately?" She rolled her eyes, but followed me to a quieter corner near the trophy case. Looking at her, I could see both Beth and myself, my stubborn chin, Beth's expressive eyes, and an attitude that belonged entirely to her generation. "What's going on at home, Becca?" "What do you mean?" "Your mother's been working a lot lately, staying out late. I'm just wondering if you've noticed anything." She crossed her arms and studied me like I was a particularly stupid math problem. "Are you seriously asking me to spy on Mom?" "I'm asking if you're okay, if there's anything you want to talk about." "Everything's fine, Dad. Maybe if you paid more attention to your family instead of your stupid electrical work, you'd know that." The words hit harder than they should have. I'd been working extra hours lately, taking on bigger contracts, trying to build something solid for our future. Apparently, while I was securing our financial foundation, the rest of the structure was collapsing. "You're right," I said. "I should be around more." She looked surprised by the admission. For a moment, her teenage armor cracked, and I saw the little girl who used to help me sort screws in my workshop. Mom says you don't appreciate her, Becca said quietly. She says you take her for granted. What else does she say? That she's trying to build something of her own, but you don't support her dreams. Dreams. Right. I wondered if Beth's dreams included my brother, or if Nick was just a convenient nightmare. I want your mother to be happy, I said, and it was true. I just wished her happiness didn't require destroying mine. Becca's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it. Whatever she saw made her smile, the first genuine expression I'd gotten from her all evening. Uncle Nick's here, she said, looking toward the entrance. Sure enough, there was my brother, walking through the community center doors like he owned the place. He was wearing his good jeans and a button-down shirt that actually fit properly. His hair was styled, and he'd trimmed his beard. This wasn't his usual casual Friday night look. Hey there, gorgeous, he said to Becca, giving her a hug that lasted a bit too long. Then he looked at me with that same guilty grin from yesterday. Jimmy, didn't expect to see you here. Full of surprises tonight, I said. What brings you by? Oh, thought I'd check out the facilities. Maybe sign up for that adult basketball league. Nick had never shown interest in organized sports in his life. He was more of a work out alone so no one sees you struggle kind of guy. That's great, I said. Always good to try new things. My phone rang, Beth's ringtone. I answered it while watching Nick's face. Hi, honey, I said loudly enough for both Nick and Becca to hear. James, I'm going to be really late tonight. This client dinner is turning into a whole networking thing. Which restaurant? I asked, still watching Nick. His expression didn't change, but I saw him check his own phone. That new place on Harbor Street, the one with the seafood. Dockside Grill? Yes, that's it. Interesting. Dockside Grill had been closed for renovations for 3 weeks. I knew because I'd bid on their electrical upgrade. Well, have fun, I said. Don't do anything I wouldn't do? Of course not. Love you. Love you too. I hung up and looked at Nick, who was now very interested in a poster about senior citizen yoga classes. Everything okay? He asked. Just Beth working late again. She's really committed to this new business. That's great. Good for her. Becca was looking between us like she was watching a tennis match. Smart kid. She could sense the undercurrents even if she didn't understand them. Uncle Nick, she said, are you coming to my game next week? Wouldn't miss it, he said, but he was looking at his phone again. I excused myself and walked to the men's room, then doubled back through the side hallway where I could observe the main area without being seen. Nick was talking quietly to Becca, and whatever he was saying made her laugh. Then he handed her something, looked like cash, and headed for the exit. I followed him outside, staying far enough back to avoid detection. Instead of going to his truck, Nick walked 2 blocks to the parking lot behind Murphy's Diner. Beth's car was waiting there, engine running. Even from a distance, I could see them embrace through the windshield. Then Nick got in the passenger seat, and they drove off together. I stood in the parking lot for a long time, watching the empty space where my wife's car had been. The evening air was cool, and somewhere in the distance I could hear the high school marching band practicing. Normal sounds of a normal Friday night in a normal town where normal people lived normal lives, but there was nothing normal about watching your wife pick up your brother for what was obviously not a business dinner. I walked back to my truck and sat there, hands on the steering wheel, trying to decide what to do next. I could follow them, confront them, make a scene. I could drive home and pretend I'd never seen anything. I could call a lawyer, start divorce proceedings, split everything down the middle and move on with my life. Or I could do something else entirely. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Carl Morrison, the lawyer who'd handled my business and corporation. Carl was a sharp guy, maybe 60 years old, with a reputation for being thorough and discreet. Carl, it's James Parish. Sorry to bother you on a Friday night. No problem, James. What can I do for you? I need some advice. Hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to protect their assets during a difficult period, what would be the best approach? Hypothetically? For now. Well, hypothetically, I'd say the most important thing is documentation, evidence of separate property, business assets, individual contributions to joint accounts. The more paperwork you have, the better your position. And if there were questions about marital misconduct? Hypothetically, that could affect asset division, depending on the circumstances and the evidence. I see. James, if this is more than hypothetical, you should come in for a proper consultation. Soon. I'll call you Monday. I hung up and started my truck. Instead of going home, I drove to my mother's house on the other side of town. Mom was 78, sharp as a tack, and had never particularly liked Beth. She'd been too polite to say so directly, but I'd caught her meaningful looks over the years. She was watching the late news when I knocked on her door. "James, what a nice surprise. Come in, come in." Mom's living room hadn't changed in 20 years. Same furniture, same family photos, same smell of lavender and old books. It was comforting in a way that my own house no longer was. "You look troubled," she said, settling into her favorite chair. "What's wrong?" I told her everything. The texts, the security camera footage, the lies about client dinners and closed restaurants, the cash Nick had given Becca, the secret meeting in the parking lot. All of it. Mom listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small disapproving sounds. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not surprised," she said finally. "About Beth, I mean. She always struck me as someone who wanted more than she had." "And Nick?" "Your brother has always been jealous of you, James. Ever since you were children. You were the responsible one, the successful one. He's spent his whole life trying to prove he was just as good." "By taking my wife?" "By taking what he thinks makes you happy." I leaned back on the couch and stared at the ceiling. "What should I do, Mom?" "What do you want to do?" "I want to make them pay." She nodded slowly. "Then make sure you do it right. Your father always said that revenge is a dish best served with proper planning." "Dad never said that." "No, but he should have." I stayed at Mom's house until nearly midnight, and when I finally went home, Beth's car was in the driveway. The house was dark except for the porch light, and I could hear the shower running upstairs. I sat in my kitchen and opened my notebook. Time to start planning properly. Saturday morning brought the kind of crisp October weather that made Parish Hollow look almost picturesque. The maple trees were showing off their autumn colors, and the air had that clean smell that comes after a night of light rain. It should have been a perfect day for working in the yard, maybe taking Beth out for breakfast at the diner, enjoying the kind of simple pleasures that make a marriage work. Instead, I was sitting in my truck outside the Riverside Motel, watching my wife and brother check into room 237. They'd been careful about it, arriving separately, Beth going in first to get the key, Nick following 10 minutes later with a gym bag that probably didn't contain workout clothes. But they hadn't been careful enough. When you've spent 20 years working with security systems, you learn to notice the details that most people miss. I took photos with my phone, making sure to get clear shots of both license plates and the room number. Then I drove to the hardware store and bought a few items that would come in handy later: zip ties, spray paint, and a small crowbar that would fit nicely in my toolbox. The hardware store clerk, a kid named Danny who'd graduated with Becca, rang up my purchases without much interest. But when I added a package of industrial-strength adhesive to the order, he gave me a curious look. "Big project today, Mr. Parish?" "Just some repairs," I said. "You know how it is. Always something that needs fixing." I drove back to the motel and parked where I could observe the second-floor walkway. Their room had a clear view of the parking lot, but the angle was wrong for them to see my truck. I settled in to wait, radio tuned to the local talk show, and started planning my next moves. The thing about electrical work is that timing matters. Apply current too early, and you blow fuses. Wait too long, and the whole system shuts down. But hit it at exactly the right moment, and you can make things very interesting. My phone rang. Tommy Briggs. "Boss, we got a problem at the factory job. Inspector's here early, and he's asking questions about the main panel installation." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggests someone called in a complaint." I closed my eyes and counted to 10. The factory job was my biggest contract this year, and any delays would cost me serious money. More importantly, it would hurt my reputation in a town where word traveled fast. "I'll be right there," I said. "Sorry to mess up your Saturday." "Not your fault, Tommy." But I had a pretty good idea whose fault it was. Beth knew about all my major contracts, and she'd been asking a lot of questions lately about project timelines and profit margins. At the time, I'd thought she was taking an interest in my business. Now I realized she was probably gathering information for her lawyer. I took one more look at room 237, then drove across town to the factory. The inspector, a thin guy named Rodriguez who took his job very seriously, was standing next to the main electrical panel with a clipboard and a frown. "Mr. Parish," he said when he saw me, "we need to talk." It took 3 hours to sort out the inspection. Someone had indeed called in a complaint claiming that my installation didn't meet current safety codes. The complaint was anonymous, but it was detailed enough to suggest inside knowledge of the project. Rodriguez found a few minor issues. Nothing dangerous, but enough to require corrections and a follow-up inspection. It would cost me a day's work and about $500 in materials. "Any idea who might have called this in?" Rodriguez asked as he was packing up his equipment. Could be anyone, I said. Competition, disgruntled employee, nosy neighbor, or someone with access to your project files. I nodded. Rodriguez was sharper than most people gave him credit for. By the time I finished at the factory, it was nearly 4 o'clock. I drove back to the Riverside Motel, but the parking lot was empty. Beth and Nick had finished their business meeting and moved on to whatever came next in their afternoon of deception. I went home and found Beth in the kitchen, making dinner like she'd been there all day. She was wearing different clothes than she'd had on at the motel, and her hair was still slightly damp from what I assumed was another shower. "Hi, honey," she said brightly. "How was your day?" "Interesting. Had to deal with an inspection issue at the factory job." "Oh no. What kind of issue?" "Someone called in a complaint. Anonymous tip about safety violations." She made appropriate sympathetic noises while stirring something on the stove. "That's terrible. Who would do something like that?" "Good question. Had to be someone who knew details about the project. Someone with access to my files." Her stirring slowed slightly. "Well, I'm sure you'll figure it out." "I'm sure I will." We ate dinner in relative silence, making small talk about Becca's volleyball schedule and the weather forecast. Normal married conversation, except for the undercurrent of mutual suspicion that made every word feel like a chess move. After dinner, Beth announced that she was meeting Monica for drinks at O'Malley's pub. "Girls' night," she said. "We've been working so hard lately." "Have fun," I said. "Don't do anything I wouldn't do." She kissed my cheek, a gesture that felt more like a performance than affection, and left in a cloud of perfume and lies. I waited 10 minutes, then drove to O'Malley's. Beth's car wasn't there, but I went inside anyway. The Saturday night crowd was the usual mix of locals and college kids, and the noise level made conversation difficult. I found Monica at the bar, drinking wine and scrolling through her phone. She was alone. "James," she said when she saw me, and her surprise looked genuine. "What brings you here?" "Looking for Beth. She said you two were having drinks." Monica's expression flickered. Just for a second, but I caught it. "Oh, she must be running late. You know how she is." "Actually, I don't think I do know how she is. Not anymore." Monica studied my face, probably trying to figure out how much I knew. She was a smart woman, and I could see her calculating risks and options. "Is everything okay at home?" she asked carefully. "Define okay?" "James, if you and Beth are having problems, maybe you should talk to her directly instead of interrogating her friends." "Is that what I'm doing?" "It feels like it." I ordered a beer and sat down next to her. "Monica, can I ask you something? As a friend?" "Sure." "Do you think I'm a good husband?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said. In your opinion, am I a good husband to Beth?" She was quiet for a long moment, swirling wine in her glass. "I think you're a good provider," she said finally. "You work hard, you're responsible, you take care of your family. But maybe you don't always see what Beth needs emotionally." "What does she need emotionally?" "Attention, appreciation, romance." "And she's not getting those things from me?" Monica looked uncomfortable. "I don't think I should be having this conversation." "Why not? If my marriage is in trouble, shouldn't I want to fix it?" "Some things can't be fixed, James. Sometimes people just grow apart." I finished my beer and left money on the bar. "Thanks for the advice, Monica. Very enlightening." I drove home through the quiet streets of Parish Hollow, thinking about what Monica had said. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had been too focused on providing and not enough on connecting. Maybe if I'd paid more attention, been more romantic, shown more appreciation, Beth wouldn't have ended up in a motel room with my brother. Or maybe some people just weren't wired for loyalty, regardless of how much attention they got. I parked in my driveway and sat there for a while, looking at the house I'd worked so hard to buy and maintain. Every electrical outlet, every light switch, every piece of wiring, I'd installed or upgraded most of it myself. This place was a monument to my commitment, my investment in our future together. But monuments, I was learning, could be torn down as easily as they were built. My phone buzzed with a text from Beth. "Monica's not feeling well. Taking her home, be back late." I texted back, "Hope she feels better." Then I went inside and opened my laptop. Time to do some more research. Sunday morning in Parish Hollow usually meant church bells, family breakfasts, and the kind of peaceful routine that made small-town life appealing. Instead, I was sitting in my truck outside St. Mary's Catholic Church, watching my brother Nick glad-hand parishioners like he was running for mayor. Nick had never been particularly religious, but there he was, shaking hands with Father McKenna and complimenting Mrs. Patterson on her hat. He was working the crowd with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for people who needed something. What he needed, apparently, was respectability. I watched him help elderly Mrs. Chen down the church steps, his hand lingering on her arm just long enough to make an impression. Then he spotted the Hendricks family, Monica, her husband Dave, and their twin boys, and made a beeline for them. Monica looked surprised to see Nick, but Dave seemed pleased. They shook hands like old friends, and I saw Nick hand Dave what looked like a business card. More networking, more image management, more careful construction of his new persona as a solid citizen of Parish Hollow. Beth wasn't with him, which was interesting. She'd left the house early, claiming she needed to prepare for a Monday presentation, but her laptop was still at home, along with all her business files. Either she was remarkably well organized, or she was lying again. I drove home and spent the morning going through our financial records: joint checking account, savings account, investment portfolio, credit cards, everything we'd built together over 18 years of marriage. It was more complicated than I'd expected. Beth had been busy. 3 months ago, she'd opened a new checking account in her name only. The initial deposit had come from our joint savings, $5,000 that I'd assumed was for her business expenses. Since then, she'd been making regular transfers, small amounts that wouldn't trigger any automatic alerts. She'd also applied for a credit card without telling me. The statements were being sent to Monica's address, but I found the account information in her browser history. The balance was approaching $8,000, mostly charges at restaurants, hotels, and clothing stores. My wife was systematically moving money and building debt, preparing for something. The question was whether she was planning to leave me or just planning to leave me broke. I made copies of everything and stored them in my workshop safe, along with the photos from yesterday's motel surveillance. Then I called Carl Morrison. "James, good to hear from you. Ready for that consultation?" "More than ready. How soon can we meet?" "I have some time this afternoon. 2 o'clock work for you?" Carl's office was in a converted Victorian house on Maple Street, all dark wood and leather-bound books, the kind of place that suggested competence and discretion. Carl himself was a compact man with silver hair and intelligent eyes that missed very little. I spread my evidence across his conference table: financial records, photographs, printed text messages, a timeline of suspicious behavior. Carl examined everything methodically, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. "This is thorough work," he said finally. "Very thorough. You missed your calling as a private investigator." "I'm motivated. I can see that. The question is, what outcome are you looking for?" "I want to protect my assets. I want custody of my daughters. And I want Beth and Nick to understand that actions have consequences." Carl leaned back in his chair. "The first 2 are achievable, assuming we handle this properly. The third one is trickier. The law doesn't really provide for revenge, James. It provides for justice, which isn't always the same thing." "What's the difference?" "Justice is getting what you're legally entitled to. Revenge is making sure the other party suffers for what they've done." "And if I want both?" "Then you need to be very careful about how you go about it. Courts don't like vindictive behavior, even from the wronged party." We spent an hour going over my options. Carl explained the divorce process, asset protection strategies, and custody considerations. He also gave me some advice about evidence gathering and documentation. "The key is to let them make mistakes," he said. "Don't confront them directly. Don't threaten them. Don't do anything that could be construed as harassment or intimidation. Just document everything and let them dig their own holes." "How deep should I let them dig?" "As deep as they want to go." I left Carl's office with a clearer understanding of my legal position and a growing sense of confidence. Beth and Nick thought they were being clever, but they were actually being predictable, and predictable behavior was easy to exploit. I stopped at the grocery store on my way home and ran into Amy Chen, the hostess from Giovanni's restaurant. She was working her second job at the customer service counter, looking tired but friendly. "Mr. Parish, how are you doing?" "Can't complain, Amy. How's school going?" "Good, thanks. Hey, I saw your brother again last night. He was at Giovanni's with that same blonde lady. They're becoming regulars." "Really?" "Yeah, they had the corner booth again. Very romantic. He must really like her." "I'm sure he does." "Are they getting serious, do you think?" "She's really pretty." "Hard to say with Nick. He's always been impulsive when it comes to women." Amy laughed. "Well, they certainly seem happy together." I thanked Amy and finished my shopping, adding her observations to my growing file of evidence. Nick and Beth were getting careless, or maybe they were getting confident. Either way, they were making my job easier. That evening, Beth came home with takeout from the Chinese place and an elaborate story about her day. Client meetings, strategy sessions, market research. She'd apparently packed a full business schedule into a Sunday afternoon. You're really committed to this new venture, I said. It's important to me, James. I want to build something of my own. I understand. Independence is important. She looked at me suspiciously, probably wondering why I was being so supportive. You're not upset about me working so much? Why would I be upset? I want you to be happy. Really? Really. Life's too short to be unhappy. We ate dinner while watching a movie neither of us was particularly interested in. Beth kept checking her phone, and I kept watching her check it. The messages were probably from Nick, but she was being careful to keep the screen angled away from me. Around 9 o'clock, her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and declined the call. Not important, I asked. Telemarketer. The phone rang again immediately. Same caller ID, same declined call. Persistent telemarketer. They usually are. The third time it rang, she answered it with obvious irritation. Hello? No, this isn't a good time. I told you I'd call you back. She hung up and turned off the phone. Everything okay? Just work stuff. Monica's having problems with a client. Anything I can help with? No, we'll handle it. I nodded and went back to pretending to watch the movie. But I was actually thinking about phone records, about call logs, about the digital trail that people leave behind when they think no one is paying attention. Beth went to bed early, claiming exhaustion from her busy day. I waited until I heard her breathing settle into sleep patterns, then went to my workshop and opened my notebook. Time to start Phase 2. Monday morning brought the kind of gray, drizzling weather that made everything in Parish Hollow look tired and worn down. I was at the factory job site by 7, working with Tommy and the crew to correct the inspection issues from Saturday. The work was routine, replacing a few junction boxes, upgrading some conduit connections, but it gave me time to think. Around 10 o'clock, my phone rang. Unknown number. Parish Electric, this is James. Mr. Parish, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Parish Hollow Police Department. I'd like to ask you a few questions about a vandalism incident that occurred last night. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. What kind of incident? Someone damaged a vehicle belonging to your brother, Nicholas Parish. Spray paint, slashed tires, that sort of thing. He mentioned that you two had some recent disagreements. We did? According to Mr. Parish, you've been acting strangely lately, asking unusual questions, showing up at places unexpectedly. I set down my wire strippers and walked away from the crew. Detective Martinez, I haven't damaged anyone's property, and I wasn't aware that my brother and I were having disagreements. Where were you last night between midnight and 3 a.m.? At home, asleep. My wife can verify that. We may need to speak with her. Are you available to come in for a formal interview? Do I need a lawyer? That's up to you, Mr. Parish, but it would be helpful if you could clarify a few things. I agreed to meet Detective Martinez at 2 o'clock, then called Carl Morrison. He wasn't available, but his secretary scheduled an emergency consultation for noon. The rest of the morning crawled by. I tried to focus on the electrical work, but my mind kept racing through possibilities. Someone had vandalized Nick's truck, and he'd immediately pointed the finger at me. Either he was paranoid, or he was trying to establish a pattern of harassment for legal purposes. Or maybe Beth had convinced him that I was becoming dangerous. Carl's office felt like a sanctuary when I arrived at noon. He listened to my account of the police call without interruption, occasionally making notes. Did you vandalize your brother's truck? He asked. No. Do you know who did? No idea. Any thoughts on why he'd suspect you? I told Carl about my recent encounters with Nick, the visit to his house, the community center meeting, the church surveillance. Individually, they seemed innocent enough. Collectively, they painted a picture of someone who was paying unusual attention to his brother's activities. The police interview is a fishing expedition, Carl said. They don't have evidence, or they wouldn't be asking for your cooperation. Answer their questions honestly, but don't volunteer information, and don't speculate about motives or relationships. Should I mention the affair? Only if they ask directly, and even then, stick to facts you can prove. Carl accompanied me to the police station, a modern brick building that looked more like a corporate office than a law enforcement facility. Detective Martinez turned out to be a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. The interview lasted 40 minutes. Martinez asked about my relationship with Nick, my recent activities, my whereabouts the previous night. I answered everything truthfully, and Carl occasionally interjected to clarify a question or redirect the conversation. Mr. Parish, Martinez said near the end, your brother seems to think you've discovered something that's upset you. Any idea what he might be referring to? I looked at Carl, who nodded slightly. Detective, I recently learned that my wife and my brother are having an affair. It's possible that Nick is feeling guilty about the situation. Martinez's expression didn't change, but I saw her make a note. How did you discover this? Security cameras, suspicious behavior, lies about whereabouts. The usual signs. And how do you feel about this discovery? Disappointed, betrayed, but not violent. Have you confronted either of them? Not directly, no. Why not? I'm trying to handle the situation legally and responsibly. I've consulted with an attorney about divorce proceedings. Martinez asked a few more questions, then concluded the interview. As Carl and I were leaving, she pulled me aside. Mr. Parish, I deal with a lot of domestic situations. They can escalate quickly, sometimes in ways that surprise everyone involved. If you're going through a difficult time, there are resources available. Counseling, support groups, that sort of thing. I appreciate the concern, Detective, but I'm handling things appropriately. I hope so, for everyone's sake. Carl and I walked to the parking lot in silence. Finally, he spoke. That went well, all things considered. But you need to be careful. Your brother is building a narrative, and it's not flattering to you. What kind of narrative? Jealous husband, unstable behavior, potential for violence. If anything else happens to him or his property, you'll be the primary suspect. Even though I didn't do anything? Especially because you didn't do anything. Guilty people usually have alibis. Innocent people often don't think they need them. I drove back to the job site feeling like I was walking through a minefield. Every step had to be calculated, every action considered for its potential consequences. Nick and Beth weren't just having an affair, they were actively working to discredit me, to paint me as unstable and potentially dangerous. The question was why. Were they planning to use my supposed instability in divorce proceedings? Were they trying to get custody of the girls? Or were they just trying to neutralize the threat I represented to their relationship? Tommy met me at the truck with a concerned expression. Boss, we got another problem. Someone called the building department about our permits. What about them? Anonymous complaint that we're working outside the scope of our approved plans. Inspector wants to see all our documentation. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. 2 anonymous complaints in 4 days, both targeting my biggest contract. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Get everything together, I told Tommy. Permits, plans, change orders, inspection reports, everything. You think someone's trying to mess with us? I think someone's trying to mess with me. The building inspector arrived an hour later. Like Rodriguez, he was thorough and professional, but he was also clearly responding to specific allegations. Someone had provided detailed information about our work, including aspects of the project that weren't visible to casual observers. The inspection took 3 hours and resulted in a stop work order. Not because we'd done anything wrong, but because the complaints raised enough questions to require a formal review. The review would take at least a week, during which my crew would be sitting idle and my client would be asking uncomfortable questions. I called the client, a manufacturing company from Albany, and explained the situation as diplomatically as possible. They weren't happy, but they agreed to extend the deadline and absorb the additional costs. By the time I got home, it was nearly 7 o'clock. Beth was in the kitchen, cooking dinner and humming something I didn't recognize. She seemed unusually cheerful. How was your day? She asked. Challenging. Someone's been calling in complaints about my work. Really? That's terrible. Any idea who? Someone with detailed knowledge of my projects. Someone who has access to my files. She kept stirring whatever was on the stove, but I saw her shoulders tense slightly. Well, I'm sure it will work out. I'm sure it will. We ate dinner in relative silence. Beth kept checking her phone, and I kept watching her do it. Finally, she excused herself to take a call in the other room. I could hear her voice through the kitchen wall, but not the words. The tone was urgent, almost frantic. After a few minutes, she came back with a worried expression. Everything okay? I asked. Monica's having some personal problems. I might need to go over there later. What kind of problems? Just relationship stuff. You know how it is. I nodded sympathetically. Relationships can be complicated. They really can. After dinner, Beth announced that she was indeed going to Monica's house. Girl talk, she said. Might be late. I kissed her goodbye and watched her drive away. Then I went to my workshop and pulled out my notebook. Time for Phase 3. The thing about electrical systems is that they're only as strong as their weakest connection. You can have perfect wiring, top-quality components, and flawless installation, but if there's one loose connection somewhere in the circuit, the whole system becomes unreliable. Beth and Nick thought they were running a tight operation, but they were about to discover they had some very loose connections. I spent Tuesday morning at Carl Morrison's office, going over the evidence I'd collected and planning my next moves. The anonymous complaints against my business had actually worked in my favor. They demonstrated a pattern of harassment that could be traced back to people with access to my project information. The beauty of this approach, Carl explained, is that you're not actively attacking them. You're just documenting their attacks on you and responding appropriately. What's the next step? We file for divorce, citing adultery and financial misconduct. We request temporary custody of the children and temporary restraining orders to protect your business assets, and we let them respond however they want to respond. What if they escalate? Then they make our case stronger. I left Carl's office with a folder full of legal documents and a clear understanding of the timeline. The papers would be served on Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, Beth would know that her carefully constructed double life was about to collapse. Wednesday evening, I was in my workshop when Becca came looking for me. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching me organize my tools before finally speaking. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit me like a live wire. I set down my screwdriver and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. She had Beth's eyes but my stubborn chin, and right now she looked scared and confused. "What makes you ask that?" "You guys are acting weird. Mom's gone all the time, and when she's here, you barely talk to each other. And Uncle Nick keeps asking me questions about you." "What kind of questions? Like, are you angry all the time? Do you ever lose your temper? Have you been acting strange lately?" I sat down on my workbench and gestured for Becca to join me. She perched on a stool, looking younger than her 15 years. "Becca, your mother and I are going through some problems right now. I can't give you all the details because they're adult problems, but I want you to know that none of this is your fault. But you are getting divorced." "Probably, yes." She was quiet for a long moment, picking at the edge of my workbench. "Is it because of Uncle Nick?" The question surprised me. "What do you mean?" "I'm not stupid, Dad. I see how Mom acts when he's around, and I heard her talking to Monica about difficult choices and following her heart. I wanted to protect her from the ugly details, but I also didn't want to lie to her. Your mother has feelings for your uncle. That's not something I can compete with. So you're just giving up? I'm protecting myself and my family. Sometimes that means making hard choices." Becca nodded slowly. "Will I have to choose between you and Mom?" "I hope not. But if you do, I want you to choose whatever feels right to you. I'll always be your father, no matter what." She hugged me then, quickly and fiercely, before disappearing back into the house. I sat in my workshop for a long time afterward, thinking about choices and consequences and the collateral damage of other people's decisions. Thursday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth and bright sunshine. I was at the factory job site early, working with Tommy to prepare for the resumed inspection, when my phone started ringing. First call was from Carl Morrison. "Papers have been served. Your wife's attorney will probably be in touch by this afternoon." Second call was from Detective Martinez. "Mr. Parish, we need to talk. There's been another incident." Third call was from Beth, screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "How could you do this to me? How could you humiliate me like this?" I hung up on Beth and called Carl back. "What kind of incident is Martinez talking about?" "I don't know, but you need to be very careful today. Emotions are running high." I told Tommy to handle the inspection and drove to the police station. Detective Martinez was waiting for me with a thick file and a serious expression. "Someone broke into your brother's house last night," she said. "Extensive property damage, personal items destroyed, threatening messages left behind. And you think I did it? Your brother thinks you did it. He's filed for a restraining order, claiming you're stalking and harassing him." I sat back in my chair and tried to process this information. Someone was systematically escalating the situation, and it wasn't me. "Detective, I was home all night. My daughter can verify that. She came to talk to me in my workshop around 9 o'clock, and I was there until nearly midnight." "What about after midnight?" "I went to bed. My wife can confirm that, assuming she was home." Martinez made a note. "We'll need to verify your alibi. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you avoid any contact with your brother or his property." "That won't be a problem." I left the police station more confused than worried. Someone was playing a very sophisticated game, and I was starting to suspect that the real puppet master wasn't Beth or Nick. My phone rang as I was getting into my truck. Monica Hendricks. "James, we need to talk. There are some things you don't understand about this situation." "Such as?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere?" "Why would I want to do that?" Because if you don't, this is going to get much worse for everyone involved. There was something in her voice, urgency mixed with what sounded like genuine concern. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at Murphy's Diner in an hour. Monica was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee and a nervous expression. She looked older than I remembered, tired and stressed. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "What's this about, Monica?" "It's about Beth and Nick, but it's also about something bigger, something that started long before their affair." "I'm listening." She took a deep breath and began to talk. What she told me over the next 30 minutes changed everything I thought I knew about the situation. Monica had been planning this for over a year. Not the affair, that had been an unexpected bonus, but the systematic destruction of my marriage, my business, and my reputation. "It started when you fired me from that job 3 years ago," she said. "The electrical work at the community center. You humiliated me in front of everyone, made me look incompetent. You were stealing materials, Monica. I had invoices to prove it. I was trying to help my family through a difficult time, but you didn't care about that. You just cared about your precious reputation." I stared at her across the table, finally understanding the scope of what had been happening. "So you decided to destroy mine. I decided to show you what it felt like to lose everything." She explained how she'd cultivated Beth's friendship, how she'd encouraged her dissatisfaction with our marriage, how she'd gradually introduced the idea that she deserved better. The social media business was fake, just a way to give Beth financial independence and justify her absences. "Nick was easy," Monica continued. "He's always been jealous of you. All I had to do was suggest that Beth found him attractive, and nature took its course." "And the complaints about my business?" "I know enough about construction to sound credible. I also know which inspectors take anonymous tips seriously." "The vandalism?" "I have teenage sons, James. They're very loyal to their mother." I sat there absorbing the magnitude of her deception. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because it's gotten out of hand. Beth is talking about taking the girls and moving to Buffalo with Nick. The police think you're becoming dangerous. People are going to get hurt." "People are already hurt, Monica." "I know, and I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." I studied her face, trying to determine if this was genuine remorse or just another manipulation. "What do you want from me?" "I want to make this right. I want to tell Beth the truth about what I've been doing. Maybe if she understands how she's been manipulated, she'll reconsider her choices." "And if she doesn't?" "Then at least you'll know that someone tried to save your marriage." I left the diner with my head spinning. Monica's confession had answered a lot of questions, but it had also created new problems. If she was telling the truth, then Beth and Nick were as much victims as perpetrators. If she was lying, then this was just another layer of deception. Either way, the endgame was approaching fast. That evening, Beth came home with red eyes and a folder full of legal documents. She sat at the kitchen table and spread them out like she was planning a military campaign. "I can't believe you're doing this," she said without looking up. "I can't believe you thought I wouldn't. We could have worked this out privately. We could have been civilized about it." "Like you were civilized when you started sleeping with my brother?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. It's not what you think." "What is it then?" "It's complicated." "I'm sure it is." We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us staring at the legal papers that would formally end our 18-year marriage. Finally, Beth spoke. "Monica wants to meet with both of us tomorrow. She says there are things we need to discuss." "What kind of things?" "I don't know, but she seemed upset about something." I nodded. "I'll be there." "James?" "Yeah?" "Whatever happens, I want you to know that I never meant to hurt you. Not like this. But you did hurt me. Exactly like this." She started crying then, quietly and without drama. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't trust my own motives anymore. Instead, I went to my workshop and started planning for tomorrow's meeting. The final confrontation was coming, and I intended to be ready for it. Friday morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of weather that made everything in Parish Hollow look sharp and defined. I was at Monica's office by 9 o'clock, as requested. Beth was already there, sitting in one of the client chairs with her hands folded in her lap. She looked like she hadn't slept much. Monica's office was smaller than I remembered, just a converted storefront with a desk, some filing cabinets, and motivational posters that looked like they'd been ordered from a catalog. Not exactly the headquarters of a thriving social media empire. "Thank you both for coming," Monica said. She looked even more tired than Beth, with dark circles under her eyes and the kind of nervous energy that comes from too much coffee and too little sleep. "What's this about?" Beth asked. Monica took a deep breath and began to talk. She told Beth everything she'd told me at the diner, the year-long plan, the manipulation, the systematic destruction of our marriage. Beth's expression went from confusion to disbelief to horror as the story unfolded. "You're lying," Beth said when Monica finished. "You're making this up to protect James." "I wish I were lying. But you're my best friend. You've been supporting me through all of this." "I've been using you, Beth. I've been using your unhappiness to get revenge on your husband." Beth turned to look at me, her eyes wide with shock. "Did you know about this?" "She told me yesterday." "And you believed her?" "It explains a lot of things that didn't make sense before." Beth stood up abruptly and started pacing around the small office. "This is insane. You're both insane. Nick and I have feelings for each other, real feelings. That's not something you can fake or manipulate." "Isn't it?" Monica asked quietly. "Think about how it started, Beth. Think about the conversations we had, the suggestions I made, the opportunities I created. You introduced us at that barbecue last summer, but I told you he'd been asking about you. I told you he thought you were beautiful. I told you James didn't appreciate you. Because those things were true. Some of them were true, but I emphasized them, amplified them, turned them into something bigger than they were." I watched Beth process this information, saw her mentally reviewing the past year, looking for signs of manipulation she'd missed. Her face went through a series of expressions: anger, confusion, betrayal, and finally something that looked like recognition. "The business," she said slowly. "Our social media business. That was fake too?" Monica nodded. "I've been covering the expenses myself. The few clients we had were friends of mine doing me favors. But the income, there was no income. I've been moving money around to make it look profitable." Beth sat down heavily, like someone had cut her strings. "So everything I thought I was building was an illusion. I'm sorry, Beth. I'm truly sorry." The room fell silent except for the sound of traffic outside and the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I found myself feeling sorry for Beth, despite everything she'd done. She'd been played as thoroughly as I had, just from a different angle. "Where does this leave us?" I asked finally. "That depends," Monica said, "on what you both want to do now." Beth looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "James, if I told you I wanted to try to save our marriage, what would you say?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the divorce proceedings, on protecting my assets and my reputation, that I hadn't seriously considered the possibility of reconciliation. "I don't know," I said honestly. "There's been a lot of damage. But if Monica's telling the truth, then maybe some of that damage was artificial. Maybe we were manipulated into making choices we wouldn't have made otherwise." "What about Nick?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know about Nick. My feelings for him, they feel real. But maybe Monica's right. Maybe they were influenced by things I didn't understand at the time." Monica cleared her throat. "There's something else you both need to know. The vandalism, the break-ins, the anonymous complaints about James's business. Those weren't random acts. I orchestrated all of it." "Why?" Beth asked. "Because I wanted James to look unstable. I wanted to create a pattern that would support your divorce case and discredit him in the community." "You used my sons," I realized. "The vandalism was done by your boys." "They thought they were helping their mother deal with a difficult situation. They don't understand the full scope of what I was doing." Beth shook her head. "Monica, how could you do this? How could you destroy so many lives for revenge? Because I was angry, because I felt humiliated, because I wanted James to understand what it felt like to lose everything. But you didn't just hurt James. You hurt me, you hurt our daughters, you hurt Nick, you hurt your own children by involving them in criminal activities." Monica started crying then, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs that come from genuine remorse. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street where normal people were going about their normal lives. Behind me, I could hear Beth comforting Monica, their roles reversed from what they'd been for the past year. "What happens now?" I asked without turning around. "That's up to you," Monica said. "I'm prepared to make a full confession to the police. I'll take responsibility for the vandalism, the harassment, all of it, and I'll testify in your divorce proceedings if necessary." "What about your sons?" "I'll handle that. They're minors, and they were acting on my instructions. I'll make sure they understand the consequences of what we did." I turned back to face the two women who had, in different ways, shaped the past year of my life. Beth looked devastated, but somehow relieved, like she'd been carrying a weight she didn't understand. Monica looked broken, like someone who'd finally seen the full cost of her actions. Beth, I said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay. If Monica hadn't been manipulating the situation, if you'd just been dealing with normal marital problems, would you have had an affair with Nick? She thought about it for a long time. I don't think so. I was unhappy, and I felt unappreciated, but I don't think I would have acted on those feelings without encouragement. And now, knowing what you know now I feel like I've been living someone else's life for the past year. I feel like I need to figure out who I really am and what I really want. That's fair. What about you? Can you forgive me for what I've done? The question hung in the air between us. Could I forgive her? Did I want to forgive her? Was forgiveness even possible after everything that had happened? I don't know, I said finally, but I'm willing to try to find out. Monica looked up at both of us with red, swollen eyes. Does this mean you're going to try to work things out? It means we're going to try to be honest with each other, Beth said, maybe for the first time in a long time. I nodded. The divorce proceedings are already in motion. We'll let them continue for now, but we'll also start marriage counseling, see if there's anything left to save. And Nick? Monica asked. Nick made his own choices, I said. He'll have to live with the consequences. We left Monica's office together, Beth and I, walking slowly toward our separate cars. The morning sun was warm on our faces, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe properly. James? Beth said as we reached her car. Yeah? I know I don't have the right to ask this, but will you come home tonight so we can start trying to figure this out? I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw someone I'd almost forgotten existed. Not the manipulated woman who'd been having an affair, not the social media entrepreneur who'd been living a lie, but the person I'd fallen in love with 18 years ago. Yeah, I said, I'll come home. As I drove back to the factory job site, I thought about electrical systems and human relationships and the difference between damage and destruction. Sometimes circuits could be repaired, connections could be restored, and power could flow again. Sometimes, but not always. The real test would come in the days and weeks ahead when we tried to rebuild something from the wreckage of what we'd lost. It wouldn't be easy, and it might not even be possible. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like it might be worth trying. Tommy was waiting for me at the job site with good news. The inspection had passed, and we were cleared to resume full operations. The anonymous complaints had been withdrawn, and the building department had apologized for the delays. Looks like your luck is turning around, boss, Tommy said. Maybe it is, I said. Maybe it finally is. I spent the rest of the day working with my hands, connecting wires and testing circuits, making sure that power flowed where it was supposed to flow. It was satisfying work, the kind that produced tangible results and clear outcomes. Unlike human relationships, electrical systems were logical and predictable. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some things were supposed to be complicated, messy, and hard to understand. Maybe that's what made them worth fighting for.